Okay, with the Cards game right around the corner and Jonathan Gannon back in town, it's time for a little revenge. So what can we expect to see on Sunday, and why is it just about a guarantee that JG's gonna get embarrassed? Anthony DiBona of Outside DiBirds joins to discuss that as well as all the other takeaways from the Giants game last week. But first, let's run it. Jonathan Gannon coming into town. That's something that we'll get into here in a second. That it may be one of the biggest games for me, just in the emotional sense of I really want to put it to or take it to Jonathan Gannon and the Cardinals. But let's talk about the Giants game because we just mentioned it briefly. But starting with some of the positives, and we take a look at we've talked for a number of weeks. We've seen the fans with signs of run the ball and all these comments and everything else. We actually saw a decent amount of running, or at least effectiveness, and some changes there. So curious to get your takeaways on what you made of the running game and just kind of overall positives there in general.
I feel like for the most part, outside of two boneheaded plays, that was really the most complete game they played all season. I mean, you take away the pick six, that was kind of a weird thing. And then the special teams play, the butt fumble reincarnation. So you take those two out of it, and I feel like it was the best game they played overall in a while. And the running game, like you said, especially we saw a lot of people pushing for them to use the pistol, and that's exactly what they did. They ran more out of the pistol. They got the tackles going out on wide, and that helped a lot. We saw DeAndre Swift get going. Jalen Hurts got going. Kenneth Gainwell seemed like he did good every time he touched the ball, so people couldn't really complain about him anymore. So I feel like overall it was their best game as a whole in general. And I'm sure we'll talk about the passing game too, but Jalen Hurts looked comfortable for the most part, like I said, outside of that one pick six. So I think it was definitely a step in the right direction heading towards the playoffs.
It's what you want to see. Again, I know that people make the case or the comment of it's just the Giants, so, can't really take too much from that. And sure, fine, they're not a great team, as we all know, but still there are some positives, like you mentioned, too. And with the running game, again, it's not only the, willingness to run the football, which we are seeing a little bit more now, but you talk about the pistol formation, the guys running counters. I think Johnny Page had mentioned like 7 different variations of the counter were run instead of just, hey, here's inside zone. That's not what you're going to get. And I love to see that. But do you feel like, is this maybe in a way going to open up Brian Johnson and saying like, all right, this is working now, let's stick with it?
I mean, it was absolutely a step in the right direction. I mean, we still hear people complaining, and rightfully so, that they're not attacking the middle of the field as much. They're still not using enough motion or using A.J. Brown and Devonta Smith over the middle like they should. We saw the one touchdown to Devonta Smith across the middle, and then it seemed like they never did it again. So, I mean, people are saying, oh, they're saving Rashaad Penny. They're saving attacking the middle of the field for the playoffs. But you have to start doing it now to get to where it's going to be able to function in the playoffs. So I think that's all nonsense. I think this is just what they do. But it definitely was a step in the right direction because, like you said, we saw them mix things up. With the counter game, you get the offensive line on the move, which they have a bunch of athletic freaks up front. So getting them and using them, especially with Landon Dickerson likely returning this week, he's another kind of freakish athlete that can get on the move and do things like that as well. So it'll be fun to see this just continue to develop and hopefully snowball into the best offense that we've seen heading into the playoffs.
I'm hopeful. And look, like you say, I would love to see Rashaad Penny. I've said it for, since the preseason, even before then, but I'm with you on the fact that it's just not going to happen. Like, we would have already seen him by now. I understand kind of, not fully, but kind of the argument, oh, maybe you just save him for the playoffs. But like, come on, if our running game was humming along and we were getting 200 yards a game, then like there's a very, very small sense of I could buy that. But it's like when we were going through the gauntlet stretch and saying like, where's the running game? We can't run the football. It's not effective. Nothing's working. You could insert Rashaad Penny and try it. But the fact that they didn't, it's like, okay, I think the writing's on the wall. At least if for nothing else, hey, maybe you got him for health in case, knock on wood, nobody gets healthy or nobody gets injured. But as long as, you have that, I don't think that you're going to see him. Speaking of health, though, Jalen Hurts, he seems to be getting healthier with the knee and him running, obviously the most that we've seen him run, certainly the designed runs, and you're calling plays for him to, I think, at least be a little bit more of a dangerous factor in keeping the ball, whether it's going to be with the RPO, whether it's going to be with the option and the counters like we mentioned with DeAndre Swift. Do you feel like in a way, could it be just a semblance of, hey, Jalen's getting healthier, so now Brian Johnson is leaning on that option of the running game more? Or is it something, perhaps it's a trial by fire, a trial by error, and all of a sudden Brian Johnson going, hey, maybe this is something we should give a look?
I think they were baiting him for a little bit because of the injury, which is completely understandable. But at the same time, you saw against the Seahawks where he was starting to run better. He looked a lot more comfortable. And I feel like now they are feeling like they can push it a little bit more. So before, I feel like the threat of him running was always there. It's just they weren't using it because he just couldn't do it. He was struggling, and they didn't want to put him in unnecessary situations to take more hits or try and push it, and then, God forbid, he tears something in his knee or whatever the case may be. So I just feel like now they're just slightly they're kind of pushing it more and more each week. And I think the Seahawks was the best sign in terms of the way he was running the ball, and we saw that continue against the Giants. He didn't do it as much for as many yards, but he still looked good doing so. And I think it's just, like I said, they're going to continue to try and snowball this and build it up into the postseason. And hopefully we just see them expanding more and more moving forward.
Lots of positives, I think, with Jalen. Granted, there was the pick six. I mean, it's not really his fault as much because it's a Dallas Goedert slip. I know it goes on a stat. It's a Jalen Hurts turnover, and there's something with this team where we just turn the ball over. It's whether it's Sirianni even in the press conference today is saying like, hey, it's not really a luck thing, but it kind of is. He goes back and forth on that, but it's like, hey, look, there's something with this squad of there's probably going to be a turnover, and unfortunately the defense hasn't gotten as many of those. But, you look at it, there were some positives, like you say, with Jalen Hurts, especially in the passing game. He made an incredible, ridiculous play on the 3rd and 20 to A.J. Brown that, I thought like, wow, okay, we're just going to back up and punt the football, and there you go. There's the Jalen magic. Also the same thing on the fumbled snap. He rolls out, fires to Grant Calcaterra, an interesting way to get your first catch of the season. But, hey, whatever it takes to get your first catch. But like you say there, I mean, these things can be momentum builders. I got to give you props too, because if we move and shift this over to, again, staying with the positive, but we shift it to the defense, you were the one really calling Kelee Ringo and saying, hey, we need to see this guy more. Hopefully we do. All of a sudden, Kelee Ringo plays against Dallas. Now that game was terrible, as we know, but Kelee Ringo got some snaps and he played fairly well, and then he's gotten some more consistency. And from his first 2 starts, I don't think that you could walk away anywhere saying that there's a negative, that he's getting to play, that he's getting more action, that he shouldn't be out there. There's nothing of that line, and he's really proving it. So props to you for kind of calling it beforehand, but talk to me a little bit more of what you saw from the Giants, kind of what you're expecting from Kelee Ringo and, the other rookies. Now we saw Ben Van Sumeren, Sidney Brown, but what were the positives and takeaways from that?
Well, I mean, Kelee Ringo, I feel like a lot of people wrote him off just because of that one fluky play literally his first play against the Cowboys where he got called for 2 penalties and still gave up the catch. Then he had the tight end hurdle over him, I feel like, and then the long completion to Michael Gallup. I feel like people were just like, they didn't understand the situation that the kid was put in because he really is a kid at the end of the day. And that was his first real action. I mean, he played 1 snap against the Vikings before that. So, I mean, people were so quick to judge and writing him off after just a weird situation. And then we saw the last 2 weeks where he was in from the start, played basically the entire game, and he's allowed 2 catches for 9 yards in his first 2 career starts. And he had the game-ending interception. So I feel like you can't ask for a better start than that. Eli Ricks still hasn't allowed a catch over the last couple of weeks. Ben Van Sumeren, I feel like if you watch this tape at Michigan State, a lot of people don't even realize he only started playing linebacker in 2020. He's just a freakish athlete that they kind of threw out there. He was playing like fullback before then. Yeah. So I feel like the Eagles gave him a decent amount of guaranteed money because they saw the potential and the freakish athleticism, and then they kind of brought him along slowly. And we saw them do that with TJ Edwards in the past, where they had luck with another undrafted free agent linebacker. Now, I'm not saying BVS is going to be the same player, but it was certainly I think he was their 3rd or 4th highest graded player according to Pro Football Focus. So I mean, it's a step in the right direction. The guy is learning. He's still learning the position. It's not like he's been playing this position since he was a teenager. It's pretty new to him, and he's building on it. They're trying to channel his athleticism and just the ability that he does have, and just making sure he reads things right. And he was flying around there. He was making plays. Sidney Brown looked good once again. The only thing that was kind of different about this week was Sidney Brown played 23 of his 25 snaps in the slot, whereas last week, where he played close to 50 snaps or whatever the case was, he was used all over the place. So I feel like maybe Matt Patricia is more comfortable with him in the slot moving forward. We'll see how that works with Avonte Maddox potentially returning. But it's just interesting to see how he's being used. And they just have so much young talent. It's nice to actually see them out there and producing at a high level.
The narrative continues to be pushed, understandably so, because it happens with a lot of them. But the rookie wall, I think everybody's familiar with this. In case anyone isn't, though, it's just normally the idea of, hey, rookie seasons in college, they're not obviously as long as NFL seasons. So you get to this stage, and usually as the college bowl games are going on right now, I mean, the season is wrapping up. You've had a month to prepare, or you're getting to about the month of preparation. So guys' bodies wear down naturally. we started to see Jalen Carter play a little bit fewer snaps, and then the question goes to Matt Patricia, hey, is this a possibility? Should we be concerned? Anything like that? What are you seeing, takeaways from Jalen Carter? Do you think the rookie wall is going to affect him? And maybe are there ways to limit or kind of counteract that as we head into the playoffs?
I think, once again, this is part of their plan to try and get ready for the playoffs because he played a ridiculous amount of snaps against Buffalo because they had injuries elsewhere along the defensive line. He played 76 snaps, which is way more than he played in any other game this season. I mean, he had 5 pressures in that game. He had a solid game. But he's had 5 pressures in the 4 games since then because they're tapering off his snaps. And I feel like that was just an absurd workload for him to have in that 1 week. So I feel like just now moving forward, they're kind of trying to reel him back a little bit, especially in these games where they might not need him as much. I mean, sure, he might be struggling. There have been questions about his conditioning before he was even in the NFL. So, I mean, it could be part of that and the longer season, as you mentioned. But I just feel like that it's not a coincidence that ever since that Buffalo game, his production's kind of dropped and his snaps have kind of dropped. I feel like they saw that count and they were like, oh, that's kind of a lot for him. So let's just cut it back and see what happens. Now other guys are getting healthier along the defense, so they don't have to rely on him as much. And then, like they said, they tried to put Brandon Graham in the inside of the defensive line. So I guess maybe cut him a little bit of a break. But I think we'll still see Jalen Carter play around 30, 40 snaps in the playoffs and moving forward. So I'm not too concerned. I think it was just more so an absurd workload in that 1 game, and then now they're trying to just give him some rest ever since then.
I think everybody's with you in the fact of we need Baby Rhino, we need Mr. Unblockable, fully healthy, full strength, ready to go for the playoffs. So I said it, I think, a couple shows ago, but it wouldn't surprise me if we see that decrease in snaps over these last couple games because he doesn't need the snaps like some of these other rookies do. Hey, you know what? Get Kelee Ringo out there, play Sidney Brown quite a bit, play Nolan Smith more often, get those guys some more confidence heading into playoffs. The question though still becomes, what's up with the pass rush? Curious to get your take on that because, again, it's been, I think it might have been a little bit unrealistic storylines or the thought of, hey, 70 sacks last season, this team can do it again. Yet, I mean, great year last year, but that just doesn't really happen too often. Still, though, there's lots of playmakers on this team, as we know, certainly on the defensive line. And, you're getting some pressures. It's a little bit more closer to the middle of the pack. The sacks are for sure right around the middle of the pack. What's the issue? And certainly of the last couple games too. I mean, you had 1 sack against the Giants. I think 1 sack against the Seahawks, if I'm not mistaken. Is there anything that you're seeing from the games, takeaways, anything you read? Just curious your thoughts there.
I think part of the reason that kind of Jalen Carter has struggled is the same thing that the rest of the team is struggling because, especially after releasing Derek Barnett or whatever the case may was, where they started to rely a lot more heavily on these guys, Haason, Reddick, and Josh Sweat, playing a lot more snaps than they were used to, especially last season. There was much more of a rotation last season. I feel like that kind of kept them fresher, and they were able to finish these plays where they're still getting a lot of pressures. I mean, Haason Reddick and Josh Sweat both have 60-plus pressures. That's top 20 in the league for both of them. And the Eagles are only one of 5 teams that have 2 rushers with 60-plus pressures. The other ones are the Browns, the 49ers, the Ravens, and the Jets, which I feel like we all view as pretty elite defenses or close to it. So I feel like the pressure numbers are still there. They're just not finishing the plays. They only have 40 sacks, which is tied with the Raiders for, I think, 17th in the NFL. So I feel like they're getting pressures. They're just not finishing the plays. And we've seen it. We've seen Josh Sweat's frustration with it, where he's saying he's tired of getting almost or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. So they're getting there. They're just missing the plays. I feel like eventually they'll start to get them early in the season. I think midway through the season, they were on pace to actually break the number of sacks that they had last year. It's just now I feel like now that these guys are playing such a high amount of snaps, that's kind of hurting them in a way because they're not able to finish these plays, especially late in games. So it would be nice to see them play maybe Nolan Smith and some of these other guys, Milton Williams, a little bit more, and then kind of taper down on the other guys' snaps to keep them fresh. But it's just, I guess we'll see moving forward.
Yeah, I'm with you. Curious to get your thoughts if we're talking about concerning elements. I know this blew up all over Twitter, and the media likes to, certainly push this out there as well. But, there's potential concerns. Sirianni on the sideline getting heated, with Devonta Smith, and then Haason Reddick comes over after a timeout talking to Washburn, and then Sirianni tells him basically get out there in some other words than that, but get back out on the field. And again, the cameras are everywhere, so you're not going to be able to hide. And we see these things occasionally. It's football. Emotions are high. For anyone who's played sports, I think we understand that. Like, you say stuff in the heat of the moment, just the cameras are not on us because, being professional athletes is just a different scale. But do you take anything away from that? I mean, is this a big concern? Is Sirianni losing the locker room? Just vibes in general from the squad?
To me, it's honestly the complete opposite because, I mean, when I played sports, I was super passionate. So I feel like it's nice to see teams and players show being passionate. I love that Nick Sirianni is passionate, and I feel like that's why the camera is on him so much compared to other head coaches. So it's going to just bound to catch a lot more of these interactions than they do other places. So I'm not too concerned about that. I know people are freaking out about Devonta Smith and what he said, or A.J. Brown's lack of speaking to the media. But to me, I actually like it because after the way this team looked in that 3-game losing streak, they need to get pissed off and they need to stop pointing the finger at everybody else or saying things to the media that just snowballs into other stories or talking about how great they played like a certain cornerback did that I'm not going to name. So it's just like we need to – I'd like to see them channel that frustration into things that are positive, and it's going to help. We saw the mic'd up with Reed Blankenship came out today, and they also had A.J. Brown on the sideline hyping up Britton Covey. So I feel like it's nice to see those things. We can't just take everything that we see on the camera or what they say to the media as what's going on because there's so much more behind closed doors. I feel like I'd rather them just shut out the media, shut out the outside noise, and just channel it into frustration that builds towards the playoffs and builds positively because it's so easy to react negatively to these things and run and create stories. But I feel like Nick Sirianni said the right things. He said how he needs to control his emotions a little bit better, and sometimes he gets a little nervous or whatever the case may be, and he lashes out at people. So, I mean, he realizes that it didn't look great, but I personally, I don't think it's too concerning.
Yeah. I agree with you there. I agree with also, I think Jason Kelce had said it earlier this week on an interview with WIP, but essentially to the fact of what you're talking about. I mean, you want to have those conversations. Like you want to go direct to the person, to whoever it is. If there's concern, if there's a disagreement, an argument, whatever the case may be, you go and have that conversation directly. Again, there needs to be a story, or media has to have a story. So as soon as you see that on the sidelines, then all of a sudden they're going to get questions and ask about it. But I get it, and I think that you had the first comment about it as well. But like A.J. Brown's comment or his tweet referencing essentially like saying, whatever I say is wrong. Like if I say something, the media's going to take it and run with it. If I don't say anything, then the media's still going to take it and run with it and say, oh, why is he not talking? Let's make, a story out of that one. So, and then you said, the whole Marshawn Lynch deal, which I love. I think he should just go out there and be like, hey, I'm here so I don't get fined. That's the approach that I would take. And then you just move on and say, they're never going to get anything from me. And that's great. But no, I feel like it can be maybe a rallying cry or just kind of come together because it's like, you know what? Hey, there's a lot of other noise. There's people against us, but we can get this together. And there's still, I think, the belief, but there's also the, hey, let's not settle for anything less than perfect. And we all realize we haven't seen perfect. We haven't seen really a game that's been complete all year long. So hopefully, you start to, get in the right frame of reference. I don't love the idea of, hey, peaking at the right time. I know that's a popular saying. To me, I don't know if I buy into that as much, but I think that you could certainly build a lot of momentum. And so hopefully you get this going this late in the season, a little concerning possibly of doing that. But still, the idea that you have the possibility for the number 1 seed. I mean, that's up for grabs as crazy. I thought it was gone. I thought there would be no chance, honestly, after losing the 3 games that we did. But as we know, with Dallas losing to Miami, the Niners losing to Baltimore, getting obliterated by Lamar Jackson in Santa Clara, there's still chances here. I'm curious to know, what you think, if it's realistic or how realistic of chances. We certainly have to take care of business. And then for those people out there that just curious or kind of checking in as far as the standings go, Dallas needs to beat the Lions as much as we may not want to root for or cheer for Dallas. Like Dallas could beat the Lions, that would help. And then also San Francisco, if they were to lose to either the Commanders, I mean, I don't know if that's going to happen. But then also they got a chance, probably a better chance that they're going to lose to the LA Rams in the last week. But do you think that there's a decent chance? I mean, is number 1 still up for grabs?
So you're telling me there's a chance?
I am.
Hey, listen, if there's a chance, I'm all for it. I mean, it's not likely, like you said, but it sucks that we kind of have to root for the Cowboys this week coming up. But I mean, whatever it takes, right? I mean, the Eagles were in position to where they could have controlled their own destiny, but they fell short, and now they're not able to. So now we have to rely on other teams to kind of mess up for us. But hey, the 49ers were rooting for the Cowboys at one point, so we can root for the Cowboys now, and then we'll see what happens. I mean, like you said, the Eagles need to take care of their own business. They have enough to worry about. I mean, as long as they're guaranteed a playoff spot, so as long as they're just trending in the right direction, I feel like they can compete with anybody, especially if Avonte Maddox gets back and they get everybody back healthy. I mean, it's huge because Avonte Maddox wasn't there at the time that they played the 49ers and the Cowboys, and Matt Patricia wasn't calling the defense when they played, and Jalen Hurts wasn't fully healthy when they played. So I feel like as long as the Eagles get in, I feel like they have a chance against anybody. Obviously, it'd be nice to be the 1 seed or the 2 seed, whatever it might be, but I'm excited just to see how it unfolds.
Yeah, and you brought up the stat too. I think I did on yesterday's show, but Avonte Maddox, the Eagles are 12-2 with Avonte Maddox playing. So that could even be the secret ingredient there is getting Avonte Maddox back, and you help the win record, even though the record's been good regardless. Like, let's be honest, we're still a chance of number 1 seeds. Let's get into the Cardinals game because again, Jonathan Gannon returning to Philly, everybody hates him. I mean, maybe not everybody, but everyone like outside of the team, outside of the Eagles, seems to hate Jonathan Gannon. I will say I'm at the front of that line. Like, I just can't stand him. There's a number of reasons. The lies, the ridiculousness of his, whatever you want to call inspirational like speeches to his team and making up things about Philly and them saying he wants to be fired. And then obviously his, hey, Philly's keeping me right, wrong, or indifferent. And we know how that turned out. And then, interviewing for another job during the Super Bowl, all those things. There's tons of reasons. You got plenty of reasons to dislike Jonathan Gannon. At least Sirianni went on record of saying, I want it to be uncomfortable. He still said, I love him. He's my guy. That's what a lot of the players also said. But come on, we got Jonathan Gannon returning to town here. This feels like if you need any extra motivation, the fans certainly have it, but they're gonna answer the bell, right? I mean, this is going to be one of those, surely not going to be a nail biter. Can this be one of those for once? Take care of business, wrap it up, just destroy the Cardinals and Jonathan Gannon.
I sure hope so because, I mean, the Cardinals seem like they're kind of waving the flag on the season. I know they just put Hollywood Brown on IR, so that kind of helps, but they still have other weapons that you kind of have to worry about. James Conner has honestly looked like one of the best running backs in the league this year. So if this is one of those weeks that the Eagles decided they can't tackle again, which really hasn't been the case too much against with Matt Patricia calling the show, but I feel like this could, as long as they could shut him down and kind of force Kyler Murray to do everything on his own, where he might throw a few picks, or he hasn't been too efficient this season. So I feel like just don't let Kyler Murray run, don't let James Conner run, and I feel like they should be good because there's not too many threats through the air. Trey McBride's been really good this season. He's one of the best tight ends in the league right now. But it's just, you shut them down, I feel like it should be pretty easy. Their defense can be had. They've had a few injuries. Kaiser White's not going to be playing. So I feel like this is the kind of game that then they're at home. A 1 o'clock game, I feel like everything is in the making. And obviously, like you said, the Jonathan Gannon revenge game. I don't want to see them doing any pew, 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 any of that stuff that he was talking about. So
Please,
hopefully,
no. God, no.
hopefully the Eagles can just make a statement, blow a team out finally by like 2 or 3 scores. It would be nice to just relax a little bit heading to New Year's. But yeah, I feel like it can be done. It's just a matter of them actually getting it done.
Yes, I'm right there with you. Again, with it on New Year's Eve, let's get a great win, blow them out. You have the rest of the day to celebrate, hang out with friends and family. That would be the great vibes in general. I didn't fully ask you, so I may put you on the spot a little bit here, but you alluded to it. Where are you at with the Jonathan Gannon hate? Are you like can't stand the guy, or is it just kind of like he's irritating? I know there's all sides of the spectrum, but I'm curious to hear where you fall with the JG.
I mean, some of his mic'd up moments and stuff like that I thought it was hilarious. So I mean, I can't really. I hate the stories about like how he went about the end of the season, how he kind of had like the call behind their back, claims he didn't know it was illegal or whatever the case may be. Mm-hmm. And that obviously cost the Eagles their chance of keeping Vic Fangio, which is huge. And obviously, given the situation at defensive coordinator this year, considering how good Miami's defense has looked at times, with all the injuries they've dealt with, I feel like it would have been great to have him here and keep him here. And Jonathan Gannon kind of screwed that up. So at that point, I kind of hate him. But the whole, like, we're going to gut these guys. I feel like everybody loved him in Philly after he said that. But then you see, like, the way he was trying to hype up the Cardinals and, like, his intro to training camp or whatever, it was just a disaster. And I feel like that disaster has kind of carried onto the field for them this year. But hopefully the Eagles can just demoralize him and just make him uncomfortable, like Sirianni said.
Please. Yes. For those fans that are going to be at the game, don't go overboard, but you guys know. Let's make sure that Gannon hears it quite a bit. So, all right, you kind of went into a little bit of the expectations, obviously, for Cardinals and players to keep an eye out for. Naturally, there are still some playmakers. Sirianni referenced it. Matt Patricia referenced it too. There's some speed. Kyler Murray, mobile quarterback. He's coming in a little bit with a sickness probably by the time game time is, wouldn't be too much of a factor is what I'd imagine. But mobile quarterbacks, as we've seen, have hurt us in the past, certainly with the pass rush like we've been talking about, lacking a little bit, and maybe even with just kind of being in your gaps, keeping contained. We've seen quarterbacks, even Tyrod Taylor did it a little bit last week. Are there any, do you think we get a little bit extra focus, effort there, and I guess what's the answer? Do you spy on Kyler Murray? Because I know Shaq Leonard, we'll see which linebacker's there. Shaq Leonard is not the answer. He played great. We got to give him his praise for how he played against the Giants, but he just does not have the athleticism to keep up with a mobile quarterback like that.
I feel like this would be a perfect week, especially if Devonta Maddox gets back, where you kind of just use nickel a ton or even dime, where you could use Sidney Brown and Devonta Maddox out there on the edges, along with kind of having Haason, Reddick, and Joshua be a bit more disciplined in their rushes, where they're not just rushing to the quarterback and giving him a wide lane to go outside. So I feel like if they can be more disciplined, I don't think you need to designate a player just to spy Murray, because, like I said, he's kind of struggled through the air, and even with his legs, he hasn't been that great this year. So I just feel like if you can kind of contain him and force him to make throws, especially with Hollywood Brown being out, I feel like that would be the place to do it. But they might not put up a ton of sacks if they do play like this, because it's more of a conservative approach, where you don't want him to get out on the outside and beat him with your legs. So I just feel like that's more the approach they should take, and not so much just blitz a bunch of people, and then that can create problems, because then he can get outside and either make plays with his legs or beat you over the top. I don't want to see a random 70, 80-yard touchdown to Rondale Moore or whatever the case might be. So just keep him contained, keep him in the pocket, and I feel like that would be enough to win.
Yes. Yep. I'm with you. We don't need any more of those big plays that shouldn't be given up. I know Reed Blankenship's been solid, but the Darius Slayton one that last week I was like, oh, good. This is going to be great. We're just going to get a stop on this drive. We can wrap it up. And the Eagles just like to play close games, and they don't like to cover recently either. So for those out there that are struggling like I am, taking the Eagles in the spread, that's it's been a killer. But maybe it's different on the offensive side for the Eagles. There's lots of opportunities too. I think as most of us know, certainly the front seven for the Cardinals not being that strong. I believe Arizona is like almost dead last against the run. What do you see? Because we've been talking about the running game too and the impact there. But is this a game too where, hey, maybe you even lean on it more so? You say, hey, this is working so far, but let's continue to build the momentum. Let's have that physicality. Let's get DeAndre Swift involved. Let's get Kenny Gainwell. Maybe even Rashaad Penny probably won't be active. But, let's get all the running backs that we have out there and get some carries.
I mean, you could have your way with Arizona's defense through the air or on the ground. I mean, they've struggled in both categories this year. They've allowed the third most passing touchdowns in the NFL with 27. And then they also have the seventh lowest sack total with only 33. So, I mean, like against the pass, they're nothing special. And then, like you said, on the ground game, they've allowed the most rushing yards in the NFL, 2,205, and the fourth most rushing touchdowns with 19. So I feel like you kind of just beat them either way. It's just a choice of how the Eagles want to do it. It would be nice for them to just kind of demoralize them and just play time of possession, not even give them a chance to score, and just run, 15-play drives, 12-play drives like they did against Seattle to start each of the first and the second half. So I feel like more drives like that would be fun. But at the same time, I can't lie. I do want to see Jalen Hurts just continue to put up 300 passing yards like he did last week and kind of build on that as well. So, I mean, however they want to go about it, I just want a nice, comfortable win where I don't have to stress about the final possession or whatever the case may be. That would be nice for once.
Yeah, it would be very nice to know what that feels like for once. Because, again, I think that we all realize in playoffs, you're probably not going to get anything like that. Last year we got spoiled probably. It'd be great. Hey, divisional round, we get a 38-7 or whatever it was to the Giants. That'd be fantastic. I'm not sure that's going to be the case in the playoffs. So let's get a couple games here, build the momentum. Lastly here though, as we wrap up, you've been on it the last couple weeks. Unfortunately with the Seattle one, that was in the reverse that we didn't want, but your score predictions have been pretty close. I think you said 31-24 last week, I believe, against the Giants. So you're right there in score predictions as close as it could be. So this week against the Cardinals, coming into town, Jonathan Gannon revenge game. What are you going with?
I'm going with a more than one possession win. So I'm going to say Eagles win 34-21. I feel like they should be able to dominate. It's probably the final score should probably be less indicative of how dominant of a win it is, because the Cardinals might get like a late touchdown to bring it within like two possessions or whatever the case may be, which is what I have them doing right here. But 34-21, Eagles win pretty comfortably.
All right, I like it. I like it. I'm gonna go. I've kind of flipped back and forth on this one, but I do feel like it's going to be the strongest win so far. I'm going to be confident with this. Again, I flip back and forth of like, is it going to be a last second cover? I'm going to say 31-13. That's what I'm going with. I think the Birds, they win, they control, like you mentioned and alluded to, you can take whatever you want, whether it is the air attack or the ground game. I think Swift has, I think he has over 100 yards. I think Gainwell could have 50 or 60 yards, get the ground game going, and then, time of possession, just impose your will, run out the clock. Cardinals have no chance. So I'm going to say that. Hopefully we speak it into existence. I don't want to be sitting here next week going, every single time we say it and then they just don't do it. So hopefully for once we get that, everyone has a great new year and we can just go into it very happy and stress-free and, enjoy the day. So that's what I'm going to go with. For anybody else too, let us know, comments section, predictions for the game. Who's your best bet too? As always, got the BetMGM picks there and prize picks as well. But I think Swift's a pretty good play. But Anthony, appreciate you coming on. If anybody, you haven't followed him on Twitter, the best follow. Also OutsideDiBirds.com for the blog. Make sure to check that out. As always, go Birds, and we'll see you next time.
Go Birds.